What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So reportedly by Rich Cimini, the New York Jets would like to complete Quinnen Williams' contract extension before the beginning of next season. Of course, that just makes sense. You don't want to walk into training camp with any kind of drama and tension, but it is nice to hear. It's been very few and far in between that we've not only developed our own homegrown talent, but that we've also been able to retain them. It's always been either the wrong player, the wrong situation, or it just completely hasn't happened. And there's a long list of first rounders and second rounders and beyond that have kind of flamed out in New York, and then we never seen them again really else in the league. Now, Quinnen Williams has quite a few things working in his favor. I mean, right now, he's looking like he's ready to shatter not only all of his career best marks, but put himself up there in the record books with some pretty big company, which is very exciting to hear. So when we take a look at kind of contract situations for the New York Jets and what Quinnen Williams could potentially look like, he could be working on an Aaron Donald type contract, which a lot of people have kind of shunned off, but it's really not that necessarily, it's not necessarily that crazy. And here's some examples why. So when it comes to at least the age factor, and I'm looking at top 3 instead of top 5 for defensive tackles, I think there's a huge drop off between Vita Vea, who's the 4th ranked in terms of contract value, and then Chris Jones, who's at number 3, and Quinnen Williams definitely fits that top 3 tier. So Quinnen Williams happens to be 24 years old, so extremely young. We're talking about a guy that's like just starting to kind of enter that prime phase of becoming a young man and fully developing your body, and year 3 into his system by the time next year, working his way through kind of masterminding all of that. Every other top defensive tackle who's earned a contract so far has essentially been 28 years old or older. So he has that in his favor. He can speak to not only his proven production right now, but he can also speak to what is to come. And you'd expect that he still builds on his performances even further, becomes more consistent, things like that. Contractually, when we take a look at kind of what's happened before for the New York Jets, the biggest contract that we've ever issued out technically belongs to Muhammad Wilkerson, but realistically, CJ Mosley, our linebacker. So he was given a 5-year, $85 million contract. He got over $51 million in guarantees. It was absolutely crazy for an off-the-ball linebacker at that time, but he was essentially the new version of Ray Lewis when we looked at it, so it made a lot of sense on paper in terms of trying to justify why you would give that big of a contract out for that position that doesn't necessarily impact the ball on every single down. Now, the biggest homegrown contract, and why I said technically belongs to Muhammad Wilkerson, when we finally decided to give him a contract extension, and I believe this was 2016, we gave him a 5-year, $86 million contract. It had $53.5 million guaranteed for him, and then he absolutely fell off a cliff. And this was after him posting one of our best sack producing numbers when he had I think it was like 10 and a half sacks plus something in that range. So huge fall off. There's a lot of warning signs with us giving previous contracts in the past with people kind of being 1-year flashes and wonders, but when it comes to Quinnen Williams, we've seen a consistent progression overall to how his career arc has been. Obviously, year 1, there's going to be a lot of adjustments. He's not necessarily suited when you take a look at his athletic profile and what he potentially would have been able to do in a 3-4, which is what he started off as. And then when Robert Saleh came and we made this switch, things kind of opened up and clicked for him a little bit more. Yes, he took a backseat in terms of overall stats last season, but you still started to see him put elements of his game together for a full 60 minutes in order to dominate an opponent from start to finish, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor this season. Now, top 3 contracts. Aaron Donald at number 1, DeForest Buckner at 2, Chris Jones at number 3. Aaron Donald, everybody's aware of, Robert Saleh is intimately familiar with DeForest Buckner, so he should right there be able to kind of work with Joe Douglas and draw the line in the sand and say he's clearly head and shoulders above, or he's about on par or worse when kind of determining that bottom line for the contract. And then with Chris Jones, he's another excellent defensive tackle in this league. And so having those three round out and kind of be your area that you're judging off of not only works in his favor, but these are guys that are already on, second and third contracts for themselves as well. So this gives you some kind of parallel into what may happen if you're talking about a guy that we plan on retiring in a New York Jets uniform as well. So much longer term thinking, but irregardless, Aaron Donald at number one had $95 million fully guaranteed. That gave him a $31 million per year average. DeForest Buckner had $84 million for his entire contract value. $44 million of that is guaranteed. He's sitting at about $21 million a year. And then Chris Jones got $80 million guaranteed. $80 million total value, $60 million guaranteed. He's sitting at $20 million a year. Now, bottom line would be Aaron Donald is the premier upper level. You kind of generally separate him away from everything else in terms of being an outlier. But again, DeForest Buckner and Chris Jones, they're 28 plus years old. And these are the pretty much the floors of the contract they're looking at. When you also take a look at our own CJ Mosley being that biggest contract, you then again take a look at he's earning about $17 million a year. Again, there's no way that Quinnen Williams is going to fall under 20. I doubt they don't give him as much as DeForest Buckner, who's making $21 million a year. So realistically, I think we're looking, and if you take a look at current numbers and what he's projected to do, and then again what he can do in the future, I think he can earn somewhere in that 25 to 27 million, per year range, probably somewhere close to like 113 million a year total. And I would probably say about 59 million in guarantees, something like that. ESPN actually was able to produce some of his end of season predictions based on kind of what his current stats look like. 62 tackles, 37 of those solo, 14 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 3 pass deflections, and I think there was something like 3 field goal blocks that he could potentially get. This puts him in elite company. I mean, the only players that have had in the last 5 years either a higher or equal sack total to finish the year, if he lives up to that prediction, was Kalai Campbell in 2017, Aaron Donald in 2018, Chris Jones in 2018, and guess what? 2 of those guys are in the top 3 contract values we were speaking of. So essentially, for all other defensive tackles, Quinnen Williams' next contract is going to reset the market for them in terms of that being the match, with Aaron Donald being treated as the outlier. But again, I think Quinnen Williams can be the closest that we'll see so far to touching that Aaron Donald price tag. And my biggest thing would be hoping that we lock him up for at least the next 5 to 6 years. That puts him at about 29 to 30 years old by the time that we need to potentially look at, trying to re-up next contracts, things like that. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Obviously, I think we all would love to re-sign Quinnen Williams. I haven't heard anybody crazy enough to say otherwise. But what do you think his contract values may look like? And am I overshooting it? Is he going to be closer to maybe the DeForest Buckner contract? Or do we think he can kind of touch those Aaron Donald heights? So looking forward to seeing your guys' comments, and I will catch you again. Peace.